This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana makes car selling fast and easy from start to finish. Enter your license plate or VIN and get a real offer in seconds, down to the penny. If you accept, Carvana will come pick up your car from your driveway. Or you can drop it off at one of our car vending machines. Either way, you get paid instantly. It's fast, transparent, and 100% online. Car selling that saves your time. That's Carvana.
Carvana.
Pickup fees may apply.
You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
Hey friends, this is Audie Cornish, host of CNN This Morning and The Assignment, and guess what? Every story you care about, every angle you want unpacked is now streaming on CNN. That means you can catch my show or other CNN programming whenever you want on your favorite device. And a subscription also gets you access to exclusive video series and unlimited articles. So subscribe to CNN at cnn.com/subscription.
I'm Chris Wynn and welcome once again to your daily How We're the podcast. And what a time to be a Sunderland fan. I keep staring at the league table as we sit in the Champions League places, 1 point ahead of the two Manchester clubs, 2 ahead of Liverpool, 3 ahead of Chelsea, and a whopping 12 points above the relegation zone. Hello, I'm not sure how many people are still looking at that, but we might get into that. And to be fair, though, it isn't just us celebrating after a couple of games where it's easier to take up those positions high up in the table. This is after roughly a quarter of the season gone. And it finally feels like the national media are kind of talking about us. It feels like they needed us to beat Chelsea to actually realise we're not a bad side. But we'll get into that and a whole lot more today, as I have a couple of gentlemen with me to talk all things Sunderland. And first up, we have our very own Jonny Hawley. Hello, Jonny.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, it's I'm not getting tired of hearing these intros and your particular habit of waxing lyrical about where we are in the table every week. It's just getting better and better, isn't it?
It's funny. You just want to kind of get your phone out, or if you've got a laptop open or whatever, you just keep going, oh, I'll just open the Premier League table, just have a quick look.
Well, I was going to say, you said that you've constantly been staring at the Premier League table. I've gone past that point. It's now just imprinted on the other side of my eyelids. You know what I mean? I'm seeing it when I go to sleep at this point.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's still coming down off the weekend, I imagine, Jonny.
Oh, God, yeah. It's just it's a magical time to be a Sunderland fan, isn't it? Like, we've all said it so many times. We couldn't have pictured a start as good as it had been already. So where we are now, it's just dreamland, isn't it?
Yep, it certainly is. And to also help us put it all into perspective, we also have a good friend of the pod who you might have heard of throughout the summer on How We're the Podcast, talking about our promotion and past promotions. He was last on after our win on the opening day of the season against West Ham United. So I'm very much looking forward to catching up with him today, because we are very pleased to have Ian Murtagh with us. Hello, Ian.
Hello. I made the silly mistake of asking you how you are, and why ask Sunderland fans how they are? We know how you're walking on cloud 9.
Well, it's amazing. Me and Jonny came on, and me and Jonny, before we started recording, said, how are you? Oh, well, brilliant. How you not be brilliant? Then you came on, Ian, and said, oh, well, he said, I would ask how you both are, but he said, I'll not bother, because, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Look, I mean, what we're talking about is the most stunning, seismic and potentially transformative period of Sunderland's, you could almost say, post-war history.
Mm.
I was looking back, and if you think about it, in the last 6 months, Sunderland fans have arguably had more ecstatic football moments than any other fan around, possibly around Europe, the world. You know, you're starting off with Ballards against Coventry, you've got the Tommy Watsons at Wembley, then you've got the Mayenda's opening goal against West Ham, you've got the last gasp winner of Isidore against Brentford, and then, of course, you've got Talby's goal on Saturday, which is at least the equal of them all. I mean, it is an astonishing array of moments.
Oh, you could keep going through them. Xhaka signing and all the signings,
Yeah.
and then all of that, the VAR decisions. Well, majority of them anyway, 99% of them. But Ian, it's bizarre, isn't it, to think that those moments came after a period where actually, towards the end of the season, some people were questioning the manager and thinking, should we change the manager for the playoffs and all this sort of stuff?
I know. I mean, look, it's Jesus Christ came along in the year 1 AD, and Sunderland's new history started with the Ballard winner against Coventry.
Yeah.
It is so far removed what's happened since from what happened then. It's almost like a new club. It is a new team, but it feels like a new club, a new mindset, a new ambitions. I can't think of a club which a few weeks ago was being described as relegation favourite, is now being described on Sky TV as title chasing. Sunderland have gone from being 3-1 on for relegation to 8-1 against for relegation, and even those odds you wouldn't take. It has been a transformation. There's no other word for it.
I think I mentioned on one of the pods over the weekend, I said it was about this time Claudio Ranieri started coming out with the dilly dongs, didn't he? When it came to Leicester. But Johnny, it is, I mean, when Ian kind of talks about it like that, and it's funny because we all just go, oh, look at what we're in now. But when Ian lays it out like that, Johnny, you go back to that period of not winning, I can't even remember what it was now, that last 7 games, or it might have even been more, whatever it was. But you think of the calls during that time. And then it takes, a couple of fantastic games against Coventry and a couple of moments like that. And it's just completely turned. And like instead, the scale where you're talking about turning the history of a club around.
Yeah, and this is something that we've kind of been discussing amongst ourselves in the Roker Report group chat as well. The idea of typical Sunderland that everybody talks about. We've mentioned it a few times on the pod as well. That idea that, if we're playing X player, they're guaranteed to score. If we should win, we're guaranteed to lose, and all the rest of it. That really does feel like it's, if not changed already, then it's certainly changing. Those moments that Ian just rattled through, which, I'm tempted to just do it again, but I won't to save the listeners time. Those are the kind of moments, like you say, that the vast majority of fans, I mean, if they get a series of moments like that in their football watching life, they certainly don't tend to get them clustered that close together. And I think the strength of feeling and momentum that's brought to us has played a massive part in the way that I think, we as a fan base see ourselves, never mind the changing picture in the media landscape, which we're going to come on to. I think it's been long overdue for us to have a period like this to, it feels like an empty platitude often when managers or whoever talk about re-establishing that bond with the supporters and the team. And that has certainly been re-established at this point, hasn't it?
Yeah. Johnny, do you know something? I was just thinking, and no Sunderland fans, you've probably got to go back to your great-grandfathers, your great-great-grandfathers, and your great-great-great-grandfathers who were watching the team of old talents in the 1890s to have a similar air of optimism and the feel-good factor that the club's got right now. And that's quite, I know that sounds a stupid statement, but it's probably true when you weigh up all the evidence.
No, I completely agree. I think, that
and I'm not saying they're a team of all tons and they're going to win the league 4 times in a decade, by the way. Not yet.
We'll settle for 2, not 4. But no, I think you're totally right. You'd have to go back that far because this playoff run, I think you can argue, is up there with the most iconic playoff runs of all time in English football, just for the way that it was done. And, I've got a framed print of the Tommy Watson winner at Wembley, which I'm sure most of us listening to this have got. And I was just looking at it last night thinking that could be the most important moment that's happened to Sunderland in the last, 60, 70, 80 years or however it is. I mean, you said since the war, I think it's getting close to being inarguable.
Yeah. And Ian, we'll go back to that opening day of the season, that last time we talked to you, because we talked to you straight after that, the win over West Ham. And since then, in the 8 games that have followed, we've won 4 and lost just 2 of those. And as good as that win was on the opening day, I can't imagine even the most optimistic fan thinking, that after 9 games would be sitting on 17 points.
Well, I'm a glass half full person, and anyone who was at the veteran supporters meeting before the West Ham game in Quinny's Bar will vouch for the fact I predicted Sunderland would finish well, clear the relegation zone, and then beat West Ham by 2 or 3 goals. Yeah, I mean, of course, even someone as deluded as myself wouldn't have predicted this. I do think this might sound a bit of a paradox, but the moment when I thought this Sunderland side's for real, and I know some people have said the Aston Villa game, outplaying 11 men, went down to 10. In a way, I would say it was after the 30-minute mark at Old Trafford, because Sunderland had been outplayed for probably the one and only time this season. Regis Le Bris had got his team selection wrong and maybe his game plan wrong. But it was just the mentality they showed, right, we're 2-0 down. We're not going to cave in like sides of old. And, even at that, should we call it a low point, there was a steely resolve about the team, which augurs so well.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, when you think about it, Johnny, what we've actually done after that playoff final, it goes against all convention, really, because a lot of sides spend money or whatever, but we've built a whole new team. And very rarely, when you look at the history, does a complete rebuild in a single summer work, especially not one when you're riding the crest of a wave and you've just getting the type of promotion we did. But we can't get away from the fact that it was a huge gamble to rip it all up and almost move into the next phase of that evolution immediately after promotion.
I think there are 2 really important things that go into that. So the first thing is, obviously, Le Bris has to take enormous amounts of credit, because at the end of the day, no matter how good the recruitment is and everything else that's operating around the squad, the head coach is the one who has the ultimate responsibility to gel those players together, bring them into a system, drill them well enough so that they can understand their roles in the team and how he wants them to play. And Le Bris is clearly a manager who's got that in spades. There's been pieces that I've read, over the last few weeks in various outlets that have kind of broken down the various ways that he set us up in certain games this season. And we genuinely look like a different team week to week sometimes. There are certain fundamentals that are always present, but the Chelsea game that we've just played is a perfect example of that. None of us could have predicted the way that we would set up in and out of possession in that game before we actually saw it in action. So he has to be a key ingredient in bringing that together. But the other thing is, obviously, we knew that it was ambitious recruitment at the time, partly because Fabrizio Romano said it in every third tweet. But now that we've seen how good these players are, you look back on the summer, or how good they've been so far, I should say, instead of getting too ahead of ourselves. But you look back at the summer now and you look at the players they've brought in and the level they were targeting, you realise, actually, behind the scenes, they were very, very serious about, levelling us up massively as a team in terms of quality, because you look now at the likes of Mukiele, Alderete, those are players who came in without a massive amount of fanfare. But when you see how good they are, you start to realise, like, wow, the levels that we're operating at behind the scenes in the boardroom they're scary.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go on, Ian.
I was going to say, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think that what's happening at Sunderland is almost the opposite of what happens at most clubs in a similar position, whereby the fans get carried away. I think a lot of fans are still saying, look, we will settle for 40 points and finishing 17th, as Le Bris is. You try telling that to the players and he'll soon fall out with them. I think their ambitions are much higher. And what I will say, I think the board's ambition, and I've suspected this for ever since the spending spree started, I think it's even higher than what the players is. I think that Kirill and Christian and Godolphy have said, listen, the sky's the limit for a club like this. What they have done, they've climbed Everest and they've set that snowball rolling down the hill at breaking speed. It almost reminds you of what happened at Newcastle under Kevin Keegan. And of course, the similarities aren't exact. Kevin Keegan played a swashbuckling type of football and was an idealist. You could say that, all these great teams like Brazil, Spain, Man City, they turned football into an art form. I think Regis Le Bris has turned it into a science. He is such a pragmatist. He's if there is an art form about Sunderland, it's in their work off the ball. But, they're not saying they're not pleasing on the eye, but they're not swashbuckling and they're not risk takers. It is so planned. It is so surgical. That's how it's so impressive here.
Just quickly build off that, Ian, what you said about the players' ambition to begin with. Do you think actually when the players joined that that all this outward talk of 40 points and just surviving and all of this, do you think actually all those players were brought in with conversations of saying, we're not here to just survive?
I think they were presented with the DVD, which we'd all love to see. And I think that has spelled out what the club's mission was. And I think, if not the sky's the limit, very close to the sky. I think they have gone in this season not just hoping, but feeling it wasn't going to be a survival campaign.
Yeah. And you mentioned momentum, Jonny, which I think is a massive word for us this season. And obviously it started off, of course, we mentioned that West Ham game that we spoke to Ian about. But, we had that blow against Burnley, but then got back on track because we made Brentford a huge event, like we did with West Ham. But the club have been there to try and keep pushing this momentum to not let things just kind of level out. And, we've managed to keep that momentum going by getting the results, but also by making these things huge. Even the home game against Aston Villa, where people thought, will it get flat because there was a Sunday kickoff. And then Wolves, we did Founders Week. The club have kept momentum up with things just in and around each game that we've had.
They managed to turn the opening of a bridge into an event, Chris. They've mastered the art of marketing things to us. And it's something that a lot of regimes have paid lip service to over the years, particularly the last time we were in the Premier League around, we've got such a great fan base and we're such a strong footballing area in the Northeast. And wow, don't they love the football up there? Again, a lot of platitudes were said, but they never really delivered on it. Whereas now it feels very much like there's a unified approach behind the scenes, and no small amount of credit needs to go to David Bruce for a lot of that as well, who I think is somebody who's absolutely helped transform the club off the pitch. And you're right, all of that contributes, then it feeds back onto the pitch, doesn't it? And again, it's something that people say all the time, they'll say the opposite, where they say, if you get everything right on the pitch, nobody cares about off the pitch. But equally, if you get things right off the pitch, then it all bleeds through. And we were never a bad team at responding to setbacks under Le Bris last season. A lot of games that we lost last season, we followed up with wins. But you're right, in the cauldron of the Premier League, as it's turning into for us this season, I think they've really recognised that actually, come match day, particularly at home, we're very good now at wiping the slate clean and ignoring everything else and going, right, however we can get everybody invested today for this game against this opposition, we'll do it. And it's been magnificent to watch so far, and I hope it continues.
And something? It's not a case of going to a concrete stadium for a match. It's going to this football conurbation for a match day experience. I mean, I was at the Wolves game early, and just before the bridge had actually opened. But it wasn't just the bridge; it was the atmosphere around the place. And you mentioned David Bruce. I'm sure he's responsible for this, but you've got the major superstore, but you've got little retail units around the ground. You've got more food outlets, and it's reminiscent of Old Trafford and Anfield. And I couldn't pay a greater compliment because, fans are getting there earlier. They're wanting to be at the place as early as possible, possibly stay later. And I'm sure that away fans are and will, now that the footbridge is linked to the city, will be enjoying an experience of a day out at Sunderland, even as if hopefully they won't enjoy the result.
Yeah. Well, as much as I want to carry on talking about how great Sunderland are, that's a good place to stop for a quick break. So we'll be back after these.
Smart water. Pure, crisp taste.
That's really good water.
It's the kind of water that says, I have my life together.
I do feel more sophisticated.
Smart water. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
Breathe deep. Imagine your legs more limber in Duluth Trading Double Flex Denim. Envision euphorically squatting for that can of suds. Bending for your toolbox in a state of bliss. Lunging for your laser level on a whole new level. Relax and allow the flex to fill you with ability. Find your inner flex in Double Flex Denim only at Duluth Trading.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
And welcome back to How We're the podcast. And of course, we'll continue talking about how great Sunderland are. But you mentioned Ian Regis Le Bris, the manager. Now, look, we all saw him in the Championship, got off to a fantastic start, and things kind of levelled out second half of the season. But of course, completely different squad. But how impressed have you been with him in the Premier League in terms of how he's setting Sunderland up from a mentality point of view? Because watching the game against Chelsea, he almost invites the opposition on to attack us, but he always talks about these stories and scenarios in games where we can take advantage. And you could feel last 15 minutes, Sunderland started to crank it up at Stamford Bridge, almost thinking, right, well, we're waiting for that one moment where we can almost get Chelsea. But we always seem to be on the lookout to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that the excellent Phil Smith labelled him the professor the other day, and I've just said scientist today. I think the professor tag might stick more. It feels like that, not just nationality wise, but there is a bit of the Arsene Wenger about him, the football intellectual. He talks about his obsession with stats and the laptop and watching games, and you can believe him when he sits at home with it on his lap all night, working. It is incredible. Every single player, whether it's a starter or finisher, and it's funny, isn't it? 5 years ago, we all hated that term finisher, but it's there now. They all know their roles. They all know when they've got to be in a low block, or when they've got to be in a high press, or when 5-4-1 turns into 4-3-3 with Tri Hume stepping into midfield. I use the word surgical. It's certainly not off the cuff football. I'd love to see Sunderland 2 or 3 goals up and play a little bit of off the cuff football, but not complaining if it doesn't happen. If they carry on playing this very measured, efficient, successful brand of football.
Yeah, just very quickly, Ian, before I kind of go a little bit more into the Chelsea game, would you say the Chelsea performance has been Sunderland's best of the season?
Do you know, in a sense, I thought there was a 20-minute spell against Aston Villa, bearing in mind it was 10 men, where I thought that Sunderland were absolutely fantastic. And I think Villa's subsequent results have backed up that.
Yeah, that's it. And Jonny, just getting into the Chelsea game, because my initial thoughts, which might not have been clear on the pod we recorded straight after the final whistle, because wasn't making much sense. But I enjoyed it so much because it didn't feel like a smash and grab like we've seen over the years. I thought we matched up to Chelsea and had a game plan. And I was a little bit frustrated that we had that period at Old Trafford, because I thought we almost did the same to Manchester United, but had that 20-minute period where we lost it. But this team is rocking up to these places with an exact plan, and they're good enough to execute it.
And again, massive credit has to go to Le Bris. I mean, we've all said so many glowing things about him already, but he really is, for the on the pitch stuff that we're seeing, he's kind of your first port of call, isn't he, for why we are so good at the way that we set up. And it's right as well to point out that I think Ian just kind of made this point before. You look at the work off the ball, and that's the most, in a lot of ways, it is the most impressive thing about this team. And it's not a derogatory statement. It's to emphasize just how organized we really are. And it kind of struck us while you were saying that a lot of the criticisms that people have had with the kind of pepification of football stem around, shackling players, and you're forced to, perform exact movements and exact passes at certain times, and you can't lose the ball and all the rest of it. We've almost flipped that and gone, right, off the ball, I as the coach want to basically be in control of everything you do, as if I'm pulling all the strings like a puppet master. But then on the ball, I do think we still have a fair amount of license once we get the ball into the, towards the final third of the pitch. Yeah, okay, there's patterns of play, but I think there is a bit more of a license for the players to take things by the scruff of the neck because there's a recognition of how much quality is now in the team. And I think that's something that, again, a lot of credit needs to go to the staff behind the scenes for their ability to blend us from a team that needed a lot more rigidity last season in the Championship just because of the nature of the squad, and maintain the best aspects defensively while turning us into a team who really can damage other, opposition, whether that's on the break, as we saw particularly with the winner, whether that's set pieces, whatever it may be. And I think that is why we are such a handful for anybody, because the thing you have to do to be competitive in any game is not concede goals. And our biggest strength organisationally is that defensive setup and the way that they move out of possession. So because we've got that as such a strong foundation, then yeah, there's going to be days where it doesn't come off going forward. Old Trafford being a perfect example. We had 3 or 4 good chances in that game to score goals, but on the day it doesn't happen. Okay, that's fine. Shake it off and move on. Stamford Bridge, all of a sudden we've got that, ability to be clinical back into us on the day. And because we've got that defensive platform, we're always in with a shout. Because after you concede after 4 minutes, you really do fear the worst as a fan, don't you? You think, oh, here we go, back to earth, cricket scoring coming. But no, they were so calm about it and just, like I said, brushed it off again, even within game. Just totally ignored it, pretend it never happened. We're going to go and score goals.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's anything new, Ian, in terms of, sitting back and, sitting on the edge of your box and being tight and being compact and taking up those spaces. But do you think it's something, and let's call him the professor or the scientist, as we're calling them in this podcast, but do you think he's almost perfected that and said, it's not so much, right, let's defend on the edge of the box and hope for the best. It's actually a strategy to say, we are going to sit on the edge of the box to actually frustrate the opposition, so then we can actually go on and win the game, rather than just saying, look, backs against the wall. If we get lucky, we'll have a set piece. It's not about getting lucky. It's actually purposely saying we're going to sit in these positions.
No such thing as football perfection, even though I'm sure Le Bris will he'll while away the hours trying to find it. I think Jonny was again spot on when he was talking about the formations. A coach once said to me that formations are only needed when you're out of possession. He said the perfect team should have a solid, identifiable system stroke formation when the other side has the ball. But when you've got the ball, you should try as much as you can to be off the cuff, to be spontaneous and the like. I mean, remember it's a long time ago now, but the Netherlands total football of Johan Cruyff and Neeskens, giving away my age now. And someone once told me that total football meant that the left back could appear on the far right wing and the centre half on the far left wing whenever they're in possession, as long as, and it seems almost impossible, the moment they're out of possession, they get back to where they should be. Now, when you're looking at Murtagh's goal against Wolves, he started off at the right back and he popped up on the left inside left channel. So that was almost a form of total football. But yeah, listen, I think Sunderland, if you want to say what is their identity, it is a side which is extremely hard to break down and has attacking possibilities because of the incredible pace and athleticism in the side, which is something Paul Merson pointed out on Soccer Saturday, wasn't it, when he was commenting on the game?
Yeah. He also said Gertrude's ball was a hopeful clearance, which I'll pull him up on that, mind. But just very quickly, sorry, because you mentioned total football, Ian. Just I wanted to bring you in on the topic of long throws, because why is there so much fuss about them?
Is there a fuss? I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because football, it does evolve, it changes, and there does seem to be a trend towards more set-piece football at the minute, longer balls, etc. And have you noticed how many centre-halves are scoring now and how few centre-forwards are? It's quite staggering. I mean, apart from Haaland, You look at Liverpool's top scorers, 3 goals, and all credit to Isidore with 4. But I mean, football does change all the time, and we no longer have 4-4-2s. It's more 4-3-3s, 5-4-1s, etc. But I've got nothing against them. If they're effective, you use them. Of course, you'd love to see a side with a Lionel Messi dribble on a Glenn Hoddle pass, but it doesn't really matter. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, give me a Dan Ballard bullet header any day of the week, Ian. Don't worry about that. But Johnny, look, as well as we played, I was still in a state of shock when we scored that winner. But that winner, Johnny, was, I think, a perfect example of where our heads are at the minute. Because as soon as Ronaldo wins that ball back and Geertruida gets possession, he didn't think about smashing it out of play or in the corners, or he didn't. He strode out with the ball, looked up, and saw Brian Broberry on his bike, who he was in position, and he was told that the game plan is, look for that ball and we might get something off it. But the mentality was, we've got possession. What can we do with it in the 93rd minute rather than just clear the lines?
Yeah, and crucially as well, in that move for the winner, Brobbey plays his part to perfection, obviously slightly aided with a little bit of non-committal defending, it might be polite to say, but he receives the ball, he holds it up, he waits for the support, because, as you say, that's the game plan. He knows what's coming, but as well, it would be so easy for a striker running onto a ball over the top in the 93rd minute at Stamford Bridge to panic and think, well, I just need to get a shot away here. If that was, and as much as we all love him, if that was Wilson Isidore, he might have had a shot before he'd even taken a touch. We've seen him do that at times in different games. And I think you're right to say that it all speaks to the mentality of the squad, where there's an assuredness about them. There's very few moments in any games where they ever truly panic and start flying into things and needing to do everything 100 mile an hour, because everything's so calculated, and they are such a unit in terms of togetherness, that I think there's so much trust through the players that they, not only do you know that you're going to do your job, the lads around you are going to do their jobs. And when that all comes together, it leads to special performances like we saw on Saturday.
Yeah. And that one on Saturday, Ian, but I think we've had some good results and great performances before our win at Stamford Bridge. But it feels to me like the national media hadn't really taken much notice of the type of talent we brought to the club in the summer until really we beat Chelsea. I mean, do you think that's just because maybe what's happened to newly promoted clubs over the last couple of years? Do you think that meant people were just thinking we were getting freak results, and then until suddenly we beat Chelsea and people thought, actually, these aren't half bad?
There's been an almighty loving with Sunderland in the last few days. In fact, since the weekend, the 2 clubs that have been written about the most, thousands of words on television, radio, podcasts and newspapers, have been Sunderland and Liverpool. The only thing, the difference between them, of course, it's all been positive about Sunderland and negative about Liverpool. Now, there's a statement we didn't think we'd be saying 6 months ago. Yeah, I mean, there's an excellent article in one paper today about the tactics and why Sunderland have suddenly provided the blueprint for any promoted side. Another reporter read, say, who are these players? And they went through them all. Now, this is something people could have done back in July, which we did. And, and you looked at the Sunderland players, and the reason I put £10 on it, 25 to 1 on July the 6th, for Sunderland to finish in the top 10, I'll show you the slip if you don't believe me, was because I'd spoken to a journalist friend of mine from Belgium I've known since the days when Philippe Albert signed for Newcastle, and he was absolutely raving about Talby and Siddiqui. He said that Liverpool and Man City had them in their files for next year. And so I was just looking at every single signing. Then I saw Alderete had been in the La Liga PFA Select 11, and everything seemed to be right. So when I put that bet on, I'll confess that I thought I'd lose it, but I thought at 25 to 1, it was worth a chance. So there it goes. Listen, Sunderland fans themselves would admit it was inverted commas, an easy start to the season on paper. Now, football is not written on paper. In many senses, this weekend's game has the team, I don't know who they are, who play Liverpool. Have they got an easy fixture because of Liverpool's form? But yeah, listen, West Ham home, Burnley away, Brentford home. If you could have ridden your first three fixtures, you might have done that. But then, of course, being so many mitigating circumstances, you've got the 10 men playing against Aston Villa playing so well. And Aston Villa, I think they've won every game since. You've got Crystal Palace, a long unbeaten record, and Sunderland got a well-deserved point there. Wolves, I thought, was a little bit of a disappointing performance, sloppy and error-strewn, though there was only one winner. And then, of course, you come to Chelsea. Well, that ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? A team who just played in the Champions League, World Club champions, coming off a 5-1 win. And yeah, I mean, it was just the perfect result. I think there was 7-1 to win the game.
Yeah, that's what I put on the preview on Saturday morning, and couldn't believe it. But I'd rather skip under the radar, to be honest. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with Sunderland getting all these national headlines.
Get used to it. It's happening now, and it could continue.
Yeah, if we can just keep Siddiqui a secret for a little bit longer, that'd be fine. But Jonny, I talked after the Palace and Forest games where I thought they were almost the perfect away performances, where we learned from our mistakes against Burnley, and then we go to Chelsea in the first away game after losing at Old Trafford, and we almost put things right at Stamford Bridge straight away after Old Trafford. I mean, we're talking about the professor, but we seem to get so much out of when things go wrong.
Well, you've got the professor and you've got a group of very able and willing students underneath him who all seem to just be absolute sponges, don't they? They learn lessons almost in the instant that the things are happening to them. I'm sure that Man United game, you're completely right to point to that as it's almost the proto Stamford Bridge performance, isn't it? That's where early on at Old Trafford we were under pressure for a more sustained period. Ahmad and Mbeumo on that right-hand side really did cause us a lot of problems in the opening 20 minutes that day until Le Bris obviously makes the changes and then we stabilise from there. But you could tell when that has happened that they've kind of internalised what's happened in that game and almost vowed not to let it happen again because it's so easy. And again, I mentioned it before, 1-0 down after 4 or 5 minutes or whatever it was. It's so easy to crumble mentally in that situation, particularly for such an inexperienced and thrown together squad like we've got. So I think it must have been massive for them in those moments at Stamford Bridge, immediately after the first goal goes in, and then in the few minutes leading up to the equaliser, for them to have that experience to draw from, because everyone was pointing out our lack of Premier League experience before the summer and even during the summer, and there was a lot of, well, they've got Granit Xhaka, but, aside from him, who've they got? Very much, well, what else have the Romans done for us? But I think that experience is now coming in spades to them because, as I say, they learn so quickly that I think, it doesn't take much more than one occurrence of something going wrong before certainly they've identified the problem. And Peter, it doesn't take Le Bris long to work out how to fix it.
Yeah. Well, I think I said on the pod on Sunday, Ian, that this Sunderland team keeps surprising me. And Jonny's just talked up there about coming from behind against Chelsea, bouncing back from getting beat at Burnley, where you thought, have the wheels come off straight away from that opening day win? Bouncing back. When you look at the game against Manchester United, you think, oh well, did that 20-30 minute period really hit us? And we think, wobble in terms of confidence, thinking, can we cope with the Premier League? Bounce back with 2 wins. We have 3 games out of 4 away from home, and they pick up 3 wins in those 4 games. I mean, is it going to, do we get to a point where maybe this team isn't surprising people anymore because we actually end up thinking, that we have now got a good team, we've got a top half Premier League team, and these results aren't necessarily a shock?
Yeah, listen, let's not look at Sunderland as the team who finished 4th, 24 points behind the winners of the Championship last season. Let's look at this side which has, as captain, someone who was voted one of the best 20 players in the world in the Ballon d'Or 15 months ago. A player who was unknown to most of us a few months ago is now being compared to Kante, who is one of the most outstanding Premier League midfielders of recent times, of two defenders who are already being talked of as the best central defensive partnerships in the country. And I don't know if you've seen, but Murtagh, I think it's only Van Dijk's won more individual challenges than his 71%. So what we're doing, we're all having to reassess our initial opinions. This is a good squad. This is a squad of players who they're going places. And what Sunderland have done is they've got everyone in the football world asking the same question. If Sunderland could beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, well, I'll let everyone else finish off that sentence because it's where can they go?
Well, we'll come on to that. Don't worry about that, Ian. But Jonny, actually, Ian going through it there, it's easy to forget actually that for a good few games we've been without Diarra, who was, the one everyone maybe had at the top of their list when we're saying who could be a big player for us this season. Then we go to the Stamford Bridge without him, of course, and win. Alderete, who's been huge for us, missing from the Chelsea game. And actually, you add to that the manager admitted last week in a press conference was still looking for the perfect solutions to the wide positions. So we've got these issues, but we're still getting the results and we're still in the position we're in.
It's petrifying, actually, the fact that we should, in theory, still get better. I really don't know how to process everything that's going on right now. As a Sunderland fan, I'm so used to thinking, well, it's going all right at the minute, but we'll drop off soon, or this will go wrong, or he'll get a suspension. I think the only thing that I imagine the majority of fans are really worried about is what does happen if something happens to Xhaka. Because he's, for all it's a little bit lazy sometimes when people go, oh, well, Sunderland are good, but it's because they've got Xhaka. He is huge to not just, obviously, his quality and his leadership and everything, which we've all, spoken about at length, but even just tactically, how important having somebody with his qualities and his physical abilities that he still has, even at the age of 33, in the middle of that midfield. But beyond that, you're right. There are still so many areas of this team where there's been enforced changes in the defence multiple weeks. There's been, like you said, Diarra being out, our record signing, £30 million man who scored in a win over England in June, and he's not in the team, not anywhere to be seen, and yet we're thriving. These are things that you think should point to us having a real good go of it this season.
And you know something, Jonny? The last time Sunderland had such a wonderful time was under Peter Reid, and that was largely down to the Quinn Phillips partnership. Phillips won Europe's Golden Boot. The big difference now is if you stood outside with the footbridge or Sheepfolds or outside the stadium, and you asked half a dozen fans who's been the best player this season, I suspect you might get half a dozen answers. I mean, the lazy assumption is that, oh, well, Xhaka, it must be Xhaka. Now, yes, he's been playing wonderfully well, and his stats are through the roof. There's some fans will say Siddiqui, some fans will say Roof, some fans will say one of the two centre-halves, or Ballard or Hume. I think Ronaldo, had he not had the three games missing through suspension, barely put a foot wrong. I would suspect that in the next few months, Simon Adingra will make an impact. He's too good a player to be in the background for a long time. Isidore scored the goal. So, this is not a one-man team, although it has got one outstanding captain, and he's the Pied Piper, as it were.
Yeah, I thought it was impressive how he drove us on in that last stages at Stamford Bridge. But we talked about the mental approach to the game with the professor, Ian, but just talking about how he seems to have a plan for each game, because looking at this Chelsea game, it seemed like a very old-fashioned 5-4-1. But then you had Cachorda stepping into midfield at times. Ballard was standing midway inside Chelsea's half when we didn't have the ball. Trey Hume was stepping inside as an extra midfielder when Michaelia stepped out like a fullback. It had all these different aspects to it, and it seemed like Le Bris has a very specific game plan for every game.
Yeah, you often wonder, because Sunderland goes so well, are we talking him up too much? But I don't think we are. As I said, he isn't a manager who is going to win games because of inspirational team talks or because the players love him so much he puts his arms around them. It's not that. It's I think he's hugely respected and liked within the training ground. But I think, as you say, it's because of a very, very thorough preparation.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
And Jonny, I mean, 2 home games next up. We are unbeaten in our 4 games at home this season, but it's almost now we've got like almost that slight psychological aspect to it, where teams are looking at us and thinking we don't fancy travelling up there, do we?
They'd be daft if they do fancy us. It's fair to say, we're not a proposition to be taken lightly, and I think another big aspect to why I'm so positive going into the next couple of games, despite the fact that, listen, as great as we've been, Everton still have players that can hurt us, and Arsenal are the best team in the country. And I think, 99% of people's picks to win the league, unless they've got some sort of bias. But the reason I'm so positive is because, A, like you say, we're a very, very good outfit and they've got good reason to fear us. But B, the work that we've put into this point, having that brilliant home record so far, getting the points on the board that we have, and then winning against Chelsea is, psychologically, we've bought ourselves so much breathing room. I think you read out at the start, didn't you? We're 12 points clear of the relegation zone as we stand with. It's not really in people's thinking at this stage. So even if the worst happens and, Everton come on Monday night and we end up getting beat, I'm not worried about the heads dropping. I'm not worried about
Jonny,
panic setting in.
It's like what I was saying before, Jonny. I think what you've just said, you represent a large slice of the support. I bet the players aren't thinking that result's giving us breathing space. We can afford to lose. And, and it's strange because on Saturday night, I am sure that Sunderland players wanted Brentford to beat Liverpool so that Liverpool wouldn't overhaul them.
Yeah.
Now, while most fans, or some more of the pessimistic fans, would have said, "Oh, I hope Brentford lose," the following day, I was looking at the results and I thought, "Oh, that's a bad result for Sunderland." You know the one I was talking about? Bournemouth beating Nottingham Forest, because it meant Bournemouth went into second place. And I'm sure that's the players' mindset this season now.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I was watching the multi-view thing on Sky Sports, and when Villa scored against City, I was like, "Oh, that's not ideal." No, sorry, I was thinking, that's a good result for us, actually. Arsenal scored against Palace. I'm thinking, could have done without that, to be honest.
I know. It's astonishing. Astonishing.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, I mean, it does feel like this side is getting better and better every time we see them take the pitch, Ian. And, looking back to last season, I always said it's a completely different side, but they came out the blocks and we faded in the second half of the season. This is the Premier League, and I keep saying now that I do actually believe we're a very good side. But do you think, because, we are stepping up to that Premier League, do you think teams might be a bit more savvy against us in the second half of the season now that they get to see how we're setting up against each team?
That's quite possible. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not as if Sunderland have one secret weapon. If they had a Haaland in the side who you can double, even triple mark, it's not that Sunderland have one strength above all others. It's a very much a collective feel about the whole side. When your strength is out of possession rather than in it, it's kind of difficult for the opposition to counter that. It's a lot easier to counter when you know what a team's going to be doing. If, for instance, Sunderland were a team with a high press all the time, then opponents would try and spring it. If it was a side with a low block all the time, then they would possibly shed an extra defender to have an extra man up front. But because, as we've talked about, Le Bris does mix and match, and there's a pragmatism about his whole approach and adaptability. Hard to say with my false teeth. It is difficult. There are a lot of players who are playing well in that side.
Yeah, and Everton for the Monday night game, Ian, and of course David Moyes returning to the State of Light, and a lot of fans always go back to his original comments at the start of that season, which got him into hot water straight off the bat, and you were slightly involved in that, weren't you?
I was very much involved in it. I'll tell you the story. I don't know if you remember, David Moyes had come in, and the week before, Sunderland had been just a few seconds away from getting a creditable draw at Manchester City.
Yeah.
And then in the week in the week leading up to the Middlesbrough game, Adnan Januzaj came on loan, and I think fans headed to Stadium Light that day quite excited. Well, it was false excitement, wasn't it? And the game, there was a lot of injuries. Stuani scored 2 for Middlesbrough, and Sunderland pulled a goal back. It was, at the end of the day, 2 defeats in the first week of the season. And I quite like David Moyes. In fact, I'll be honest, I quite like the man. I've kept in touch a little bit, and sometimes accidentally, because his name in my phone book is just above my brother David Murtagh. So, but that's another story. Anyway, I'd filed my report, and I was looking for quite a prominent reaction piece from David Moyes. Now, I didn't throw a hand grenade at him. I threw an underarm tennis ball, and I said, the way I phrased the question was, David, there will be a lot of fans walking out of this ground right now saying, here we go again, another relegation battle. Now, I'll be totally honest, I thought he'd say, well, we've just got to make sure that that's not the case. And his answer, it stunned us all. He said, well, they're right, aren't they? And that is the story of his infamous pessimism.
Wow.
And call it honesty if you want, and he was proved right. But no, none of us in the press room that afternoon expected that answer.
Yeah. Did he not kind of realise for a second or two when he realised your reaction when people were scribbling and going, oh, hang on, he's give us something here?
Well, we're just scribbling it, and I don't think he did. And he might say to this day, well, I knew what I was taking on. He'd been told there was no money to spend, and the owner was becoming disillusioned. Kone was wanting out, and he didn't get the players in he really wanted. So, the injuries had already kicked in. So, there were a lot of, compared to now, feel bad factors around the club. But yes, you want people to be honest, but not quite that honest so early in the season.
Yeah, I remember.
It's funny actually when you look at Le Bris now. Have you noticed, if you ask him a question that he doesn't know the answer for, he says, "I don't know."
Yeah.
It's remarkable, because he just says it, which I've never come across a manager who is so straight that he'll say, "I don't know the answer to that."
Yeah, I love watching the game of chess between him and the press every single week. The press trying to squeeze something out of him. He just
we always lose. We always lose.
Yeah, he doesn't have any of it. I mean, Jonny, as much as we kind of, talk about that, it is going to, we can't get away from the fact it is going to add an extra edge to that game, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm excited to give some of my feedback to the man who masterminded the 16-17 season. I say in my most diplomatic tone possible. But beyond that, listen, you're right. It's definitely going to be present in the atmosphere, isn't it? It's going to add a bit of bite to proceedings on Monday night. But that being said, and as much as I'll play up to the whole, oh yeah, we all hate David Moyes for whatever, I hope it doesn't become a sideshow. It's a Monday night football under the cameras. We've got a big game of football to play. Like, I'm not worried about the players. I'm not worried about Le Bris. Like, Le Bris had them all ignoring the fans in Wembley before the playoff final, man. Like, that bloke, everything just washes over him. But yeah, I just hope that it doesn't end up overshadowing things. It's the return of Jordan Pickford to the Stadium Light as well. So, I'm sure he'll get a fantastic and well-deserved reception when he walks out the tunnel. We're in such a good spot as we are. And obviously, like I say, it's a big game. If we are able to take 3 points on Monday night, then, things are in motion, which maybe can't be undone at that point. But yeah, I just, like I say, don't get us wrong. I will be making noises of discontent from my seat a little bit, but I just hope that when we come away from the match, nobody's talking about him and everybody's talking about Wilson Isidore or, whoever it is who's just put the ball in the back of the net.
And Jonny, it's conceivable, isn't it, if Sunderland do beat Everton, that the game against Arsenal 5 days later could be a top of the table clash.
It may cease to be with a wry tone and some irony that Peter Drury describes us as title challenging Sunderland on Sky Sports.
Chris, you remember the last time Sunderland, I think it was in 2001, they were second when Manchester United were first. I think Sunderland, they'd won 2-0 at West Ham in the first week in January. Then they had a very disappointing goalless draw against Bradford City, but it took them to second. And I think Man United were good 6 or 7 points clear at the top, might have been even more. But that was a second v first game at the Stadium Light. I think, did Man United win 1-0 or 2-0? Michael Gray gets sent off, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've got 2-1 in my head, but I might be wrong.
It might be right, but so it won't be the first time this millennium where we can talk about top of the table clashes at the Stadium Light.
Well, yeah, I was going to end on this point, Ian, because I was looking at a list this morning, sixth on the list of best starts by a newly promoted side. When you look at the first 9 games, level on points with Peter Reid's side in the season, in the 99-2000 season, finished 7th on that occasion. And I've said this a couple of times, and we've said it on the pod over the last week, that this just feels different. This doesn't feel like a momentum thing from the season before. This feels like you kicked us off on this pod, Ian, by saying it feels like a momental kind of shift in the club and where the
possibly could be. Yeah,
but how difficult is it going to be to keep that? We're talking about momentum. Is it a case of keeping that going, or have we now got a squad that are built for the Premier League and it's not going to be about momentum?
Well, we think that there's a 4-pronged structure which gives off a feel-good factor. First of all, you've got the fans are at one with the players and the club like rarely seen before. Then you've got the players, and we've talked about them a lot. A lot of these players are used to winning with their previous clubs, and the manager, of course. Then you've got the 2 sporting directors who are clearly outstanding at recruitment and identifying, and then you've got the infrastructure. Even above that, you've got an owner who, as I've said before, I think this man is massively ambitious. He has set his sights sky high at Sunderland. So I think everything is going not only in the right direction, but pulling in the right direction at a breathtaking speed.
Yeah, well, I couldn't think of a better place to leave it on such a positive note than that for today's pod. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much, Jonny. Always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Never a chore, Chris.
Absolutely. And Ian, thank you so much once again for joining us. And hopefully we'll maybe talk before the derby.
Apologies for letting my optimism run wild.
I think we're all guilty of that at the moment. I'm trying
it's in my DNA.
I'm trying to dampen myself at the minute, just so I'm not don't get disappointed like I did all those years ago under Peter Reid. I thought we were Champions League bound, and never. We'll see what happens this time around. But no, thanks for your time, Ian. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Of course, we'll have all the build-up leading up to that Everton game on Monday. We'll have everything on the Roker Report website to go through all of the latest news, or Sunderland-related news anyway. But don't forget, we'll have daily releases on How We Podcast. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.